After the tennis court oath, Louis stationed Swiss guards at the Palace of Versailles, which is the royal palace where the royal family and his advisors stay. This poses a large problem. He stationed them there to protect himself from the mobs. However, many people in France are upset by this. Number one, they did not see themselves as posing a threat to the king. They were merely revolting against the three different estates. So the fact that the king took up guards kind of made them take a step back and saying, why are you posting guards? We're not coming against you. Number two, they're Swiss guards. They are not French guards. So the fact that he has foreign troops protecting him, not French troops, will also anger the Third Estate. At this point, people are very angry. They begin taking to the streets. The next thing that the people are going to do is storm the Bastille. The Bastille is a prison slash fortification. So it has many political prisoners, people who speak out and do anything against the king or the government. It's not like in America where you can say, well, I don't think the president's doing a good job, he's an idiot, so on and so forth. Here you can say that, no harm, no foul. In fact, you'll probably get people to agree with you. However, in France at this time, if you spoke out against the king or the government, you'd be put in jail indefinitely. And not like jails here where you get 3 square meals a day and everything else. When you went to jail, you were given very little food. You'd be tortured and beaten regularly. You live with rats and all kinds of terrible conditions. So not a very pleasant place to be. So this Bastille was a sign of oppression, a sign of the king's ability and the nobility's power over the people to keep them down. On top of that, it was also an outpost for soldiers, so it had gunpowder. So the citizens want to attack it, take it over, A, to say we're done being stepped on, and B, so that they can get gunpowder, arms, and munitions to continue their revolt. They come in, they demand things from the commander of the guard. He says, you're not coming in, you're not releasing these prisoners, so on and so forth. So the angry mob hacks the guards and the commander to pieces. Then they parade the body parts through the streets, carrying them like trophies all around, showing their victory over the Bastille. They then tear down the Bastille brick by brick. And now these aren't small little bricks like you see on the side of houses today. These are 1 or 2 foot by 1 foot giant slabs that you're going to need chisels and hammers and all kinds of machinery to take down. And they do it. They hate the Bastille so much that they take the time to break apart each brick and tear that old castle down. And this is commemorated every year in France on July 14th as Bastille Day. Yes, that's correct. France celebrates the day that it barbarically hacked people apart and put them through the streets like a bunch of animals. Go France. Here you see an artist's representation of the taking of the Bastille, a little bit more dramatic than what actually happened. You see cannons and fires and as though it were almost a siege, which is not exactly how it happened. It is true to the fact that yes, most people in all levels of classes took part in the storming of the Bastille. So you have some wealthy people, you have women, you have some younger children. However, you don't have regular militia or armed forces, and as I said, it's not as though the Bastille held out for days on end. It was more of they came in the gates, made their demands, they weren't met, and then the battle was very quickly over with a victory for the revolutionaries. So, not completely historically accurate. Here you see more of the same thing, a little bit more historically accurate. You see they're on the outs, or they're in the inside of the Bastille already. You see here that you have the a little bit difficult with the quality of the photo, but you see the troops here guarding the Bastille and the mob here, and basically it was a very quick fight out in the open, not behind the fortifications. Very quickly were the guards defeated and then summarily hacked to death. After this, the Great Fear is going to sweep France. Peasants were afraid that nobility were going to then take action against them, that they were going to get revenge for what was happening. So the peasants decided to strike first. They march into all of the old castles and manors and destroy the documents and the manors themselves. What documents are they destroying? Well, papers that would tie them to the lands. At this point in French history, serfdom still existed, meaning if you were born into the manor system, you would work on that land, give a portion of your crops to the owner of that land, and you would do that your whole life. You could not go anywhere or do anything without permission of the lord of the manor. So if you destroyed any documentation saying that you are a serf of that land, you were in essence free to do what you wanted. So that's the number one reason why they stormed in and destroyed the documents. Number two, they were also lashing out against their oppressors. People who had kept them down for years, abused them, mistreated them. They were burning down their household. In October of 1789, Parisian women, that's women from Paris, armed with axes and knives, marched to the Palace of Versailles. They demanded that Louis give them bread and return to Paris. Now these ladies walked into the palace, they kill guards, they almost kill Marie Antoinette. The only thing that saves her is that before she could be caught by the women, she made it into her husband's room and he barricaded the door, and then he agreed to come back to Paris and stay there and not in his palace in Versailles. In essence, at this point, he was under house arrest in Paris. Here you see a representation of that. The revolutionaries are storming in. They've captured the king. They're bringing him back to Paris. They're hoisting their own new flag, the revolutionary flag, the blue, white, and red in the background, signifying this change in French government. Here is another artist representation. These are the women storming the palace at Versailles, armed to the teeth. They have axes, they have picks, they have cannons, they have swords, and they're ready to take action for what they believe in. And the reason that they're doing this, once again, is the price of bread is so high, they can't feed their families. So because they have no food, they have so much pent-up rage, and this is now an outlet for them to channel that rage, which they do very well. So the revolution is going to bring reform and then terror. So the National Assembly reforms France. On August 4, 1789, nobles and clergy joined the reform movement, mostly because they have to. They see that the king's already been taken prisoner. They see that the guards are going to hang to death. They know that if they don't join in, they're going to be on the outside, which means they're going to be attacked next. The National Assembly then grants the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and Citizen. However, ladies, this is only for men. This is not for women. So it's not equality for all. Olympe de Gouges is the main writer of it, and in it, it says that every man has the right to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. They also get individual freedoms like justice, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. At this point, the church, who had been on its own separate entity, did not have to pay taxes, had its own land, lots of power, will come under the control of the church. For you to get a high position in the church, as in bishop, cardinal, so on, you would now be elected by the National Assembly. Before that, you were appointed by someone in the church. The cardinal appoints a bishop, and so on and so forth. This angers the peasants. And the reason for it is the peasants like their traditional religion. They like their Catholicism the way it is. They don't want it changing. Because it's changed, they feel hurt, offended. They don't like it. So this is one thing that the reform does that the peasants aren't in agreement with. At this point, Louis is in Paris. He decides that things are getting a little too crazy, and he decides that it's time for him to make an attempt to escape, to get out before something bad happens. So he disguises himself as a lowly carriage hand, gets his family into a carriage, and tries to go to the Austrian Netherlands. Why? Remember, his wife, Marie Antoinette, is from Austria. If he can make it into Austrian-held territory in the Netherlands, they'll most likely take care of him and his family because they are family and relatives. However, near the border of the Austrian Netherlands and France, Louis is caught and then escorted back under guard to Paris. Now, at this point, the revolutionary movement is going to split. There's going to be large divisions. First thing that's going to happen is that a limited monarchy will be put in place. This happens in September of 1791, meaning there will be a king, he will have some power. However, he will not have all power. It'll be kind of like Great Britain is today. Well, there is a queen, she is the head of state, but she doesn't really do anything. She sits there and looks pretty. This is kind of what the revolution at this point wants for Louis and his family. They then form the Legislative Assembly. However, as I said, the movement is going to split. And two of the big reasons are A, debt, and B, hunger. The national debt keeps accumulating at this point. Now money and taxes will be drawn in to finance the revolution, to put down the king's government, to stop people from invading France. So the army needs to be paid, you need supplies, the debt gets bigger. The revolution at this point is not taking care of the problem of the fact that there are still bad harvests, there's still not enough food, people are still hungry, and the price of bread is still through the roof. So the next time the Legislative Assembly meets, and they meet in the room, there are deep-seated frictions. On the left side of the room, a group of people get together, and they're known as the Radicals. They want no monarchy and sweeping changes throughout the French government, complete changeover. Another group sits on the right side of the meeting hall. They're known as the Conservatives. They want to keep the limited monarchy, they want to keep the limited changes. This left and right is what we still speak of today for political ideology. For instance, in American society today, if you are on the left end of the spectrum, you are liberal. Democrats are closer to the left. Okay? Liberal means change. And on the opposite side, the right side, are conservatives. They want to keep things the same. Republicans are more towards the right. So this meeting place has its ripple effect throughout history. You have another group in France known as the émigrés. They want to undo the revolution. These people left France, emigrated out of France when the revolution happened, and they want things to go back to the way that they were. And then there's the sans-culottes. Sans-culottes literally means those without knee breeches. At this point in history, people wore what you would typically think of when you think of Benjamin Franklin or other people from the Revolution. The high stockings and the pants that go down to the knees, similar to like capri pants for girls today. And people who wore those were typically wealthier people. Why? Because people who worked in factories, worked on farms, needed to wear pants, slacks, all the way down to the leg to protect their shins from sparks from working in the blacksmith, to prevent dirt and other debris from getting on their socks and things like that. So they wear long pants. So typically those who do not wear knee breeches are the poorer classes. And this group of people, this working class, peasant class, they want great changes. They want to completely revamp the way things are done. Here's an example of a sans-culotte. And notice they're wearing the flag of the revolution.